Welcome, everybody. I'd like to introduce Rachel. She's got an amazing story of recovery. I've been following her on and off on her YouTube channel and on Instagram, and she went through some crazy shit, I would have to say. We got a good list of the symptoms that she went through. Why don't you give us the gist? What was your perfect storm like? What did you deal with?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thanks for having me. So basically how it started for me was, I would say in high school and early college, I started having off and on symptoms of chronic illness, such as migraines, headaches, dizziness, fatigue. But overall, up until I turned about 20, I was able to function pretty well, live a normal life, just not feeling great, which I think is pretty normal. People don't know that, but it is.
Yeah.
And so when I was in college, I was kind of somebody that said yes to everything. And I had no concept of truly taking care of myself. And, you know, I saw myself as healthy, but looking back, that's not what I would say now. But
Yeah.
basically, I was very kind of high achiever traits, always trying to get top grades, but also trying to do all the adventures and go on camping trips. And I was a climber and I was a climbing instructor. And so I just didn't have a concept of what rest was. And I also wasn't feeling my body well. Living in college dorms and stuff like that, that kind of was part of my perfect storm. But I think
Yeah.
maybe what the trigger for me was an infection. So I had episodes of recurrent mononucleosis. And so ever since I was in 5th grade, every few years they would say, "Oh, you've got mono again," which is kind of weird. But I would have kind of recurrent infections. And it was this particular time that I just got sick, but then I didn't get better. I was having dizziness while I was exercising and climbing, and I was having trouble getting out of bed, and just I kept pushing, because that was my personality, I guess, at the time.
Yeah.
And it was just like, I'll just push through it. It'll get better. I just need to be tough, and I need to tough it
Yeah.
out. And so I was getting all these symptoms of, severe pressure headaches and migraines and the dizziness and the severe fatigue, feeling like my limbs were really heavy. And it got to a point where I couldn't I couldn't go to class. And
Yeah.
so I had to kind of do class online and get help from family and stuff. And at some point, I think a couple months down the road from that, I guess you could say perfect storm, I started to realize, okay, I got to go to the doctor and try to see what's going on. And I actually had a friend that was diagnosed with POTS. So I kind of had done some research on my own, and I was like, that sounds kind of like what I'm going through. And so I was diagnosed with POTS pretty quick. I
Yeah.
I had all the kind of testing done, and they gave me, they said fluids and compression socks, and gave me the typical eat a lot of salt type of speech. And I did end up going on a beta blocker medication, and that actually did help for a while. And I was able to kind of get back into life again for a little bit of time. But I still felt really sick. It was just it was just helping a little bit with the function. And then this kind of went on for a year or so, and I went through phases of it being really bad.
You able
So
to hear
I
me?
was 20 when this started, when the chronic illness symptoms really started to get worse. And I was dating my now husband at the time, and we came to a certain point where we wanted to get married, but I wanted to get better before I got married. But we eventually just decided to get married anyways. And it was a good thing that we did that, because after we got married, I had kind of almost a second perfect storm where I got even worse. And that was when the really debilitating symptoms came on, where I was having non-epileptic seizures, I was having nerve pain, I was having, tingling in my arms and legs. I would get weakness in my legs, and my legs would, give out, and I would have fainting episodes. And at this point, I had been diagnosed with several other conditions. And I know sometimes, to me, I don't identify with any of these anymore. I don't say I have them, but I think it can be helpful for people who are in a different part in their journey to just see that there are people in a similar situation that really are healing. And so at this point, I had been diagnosed with Ehlers-Danlos syndrome. I was diagnosed with Chiari Malformation, intracranial hypertension, which is high pressure in the brain. I had cerebral spinal fluid leaks, and I had craniocervical instability. I got to a point where I was in a neck brace, and I had severe instability in my neck, and that was causing all sorts of neurological symptoms that were really scary. I had adrenal insufficiency, and later was diagnosed with chronic Lyme disease and gastroparesis. The list just kind of goes on. I'm sure I didn't touch all of them, but those are some of the main ones. And
food sensitivities? Did you have
food
sensitivity? Did you have food sensitivities?
Definitely. And I actually, with the gastroparesis, I got to a point where I could barely eat anything at all. And I had been recommended to get a feeding tube several times, but never ended up going through with it. But at this point, I've gained 50 pounds from my lowest weight. So I was really underweight. And so
what about was it the brain malformation? Did they what did they tell you what you could do with that? Were they going to try to get you to do surgery?
So I did do surgery. And
you did?
Yeah. So
wow.
This is definitely a interesting part of the story. But I had 5 brain and neurosurgeries, and of course tried all sorts of different medications as well. We went to top doctors for all these diagnoses that I had, and it was just, that was all they had to offer was medications and surgeries. And I actually, after I had my skull to C2 fused, and at the same time I had a decompression where they shaved off, whatever on your skull. And I continued to get sicker and sicker. That did not help me. And I had a tethered cord release.
So the brain malformation, what happens is a part of your brain expands, so you have speech problems, you think slowly, you have issues because it's expanding. It makes sense. So they try to cut a piece out so it can kind of do its thing. Yeah,
but it's really interesting because after the surgery, even on the scan, it really didn't look better. And so interestingly enough, I was really, really sick, and we had gone back to my neurosurgeon, and I think this was the point in time where I was almost at my worst, and they offered more surgery, but everything in me just told me, no, this is not right. Like we've been doing this for years. We've been doing this for years, and I am not getting better. And so if I'm going to get better, if I'm going to survive, there has to be another way. And
well, so plus every time you have one surgery, it's adding loads to your bucket even more.
Yes. And when you're that
your baseline's just screaming at you.
Yeah, and when you're that sick, you don't really have the capacity to handle that kind of stressor well.
Yeah, that's true.
And so those things, I had complications with those surgeries. I actually had an infection where I was in the hospital, and IV antibiotics, had to have emergency surgery, just all sorts of crazy stuff. And honestly, looking back, I'm like, how did I even survive that? I really, truly felt like I was dying every single day. And it was hard to get through every...
I think you were protected because you had a bigger purpose, right?
Yeah.
And you had to suffer. You had to go through it. It's one of those things.
Yeah, and I'm grateful I did. Like, my life is better because of it. And it was worth learning what I learned through it. And as hard as it was, I would never want to go back there, but it was definitely, worth it. But anyway, so I did have those surgeries, and even with the fusion surgery and the neck instability, my neck just below it was really unstable, and it just had a domino effect. And obviously at the time my connective tissue was not functioning right, and so to recommend a surgery like that, it just, now looking back, I'm like, this is crazy. But my neck was so unstable about a year and a half after surgery that like I felt like I was like choking when I took my neck brace off, and it was just, yeah, it was really extreme. And the pain was extreme too. And yeah, just the dizziness, the vertigo, and all those
So going
things.
through all these symptoms that you listed, and at that young age, what did you like? What did you feel? Did you feel like why me? Why is this happening to me? Like, I'm so young. Why am I going through all this?
Yeah.
Did you feel like,
Yeah, I definitely did. And I think it's interesting because, maybe my situation was a little extreme or whatever, but now looking back, I'm like, I wasn't unique. Like there was nothing different about me. And it makes perfect sense why I got sick. Like it, but then at the time I had no idea. And I just felt like I got unlucky. But
well, because now, because you've been through the experience, you overcame, you've learned some shit along the way, and you've been awakened to what's really going on. And once you're awakened, it's like, well, that's not such a big deal, really. It just makes sense. It just adds up. It's not rocket science, but when you're in it, it's rocket science.
Yep.
It's crazy.
And it's interesting too, because like now coming on the other side of it, I'm like, everybody is sick. Everybody's really sick. And if you're not sick, it's a ticking time bomb. And it's like,
you can see, like, I'm looking at everybody's buckets. I'm like, oh, I can see, that guy. Oh, I can explain everything that everybody's going through. And I'm like, oh, I can't help everybody because they got their own beliefs and their own, the more I try, the more they don't want to listen.
I think people desperately try to find the answer or the cause for this thing. And not so much about that. Like maybe the Lyme disease was the straw that broke the camel's back, but was it the only thing that contributed to your illness or the main contributor? Probably not.
It's the last thing that it's the last
body can't handle anymore.
Yeah, it was the last drop in the bucket, but it gets the blame, right? So it's not the Lyme, it's not the food, it's not the mold, it's not the EMF, it's not the blah 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 blah, but it gets the blame for all the other shit through your life.
Yeah.
And I get it. I did the same shit. I understand. I've been through that. And I know why people do that. But they need to, they have to go through the same shit that we did to awaken to understand, oh, wait a minute. It's not this. It's not that. It's not all the Facebook groups that I went down, all the rabbit holes. Did you end up going to some of these rabbit holes, these Facebook groups at all?
Oh my gosh. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, yeah, it was I was so desperate to get better that I was constantly researching, and that was all I could really do at the time because I was just in bed and I was like, researching solutions for all these things, and it was all about like fix, and of course we both know that isn't the way out, but that at the time was where I was at. So
it's exhausting, like hours and hours, probably for years, right? And then especially when the perfect storm hits, you're willing to try anything. And all the money spent on supplements and all the protocols, the gut healing protocols were all fucking bullshit, right? I've been there, done that. And it's how we were lucky that we were able to break free from these groups, because a lot of people don't. A lot of people are stuck in this reality, right? So it's incredible how we were lucky to break free. And then you kind of wake up and you're like, wow, if only they knew, right?
Oh yeah, absolutely. And I think it's interesting because it takes everybody a certain amount of time to shift their beliefs and to get to a point where they really realize what needs to be done to heal. And it's hard because it would be easier to take a pill or to have a surgery or go get a treatment and have that be the most important part of your healing. But it's not. It never is. Right. And that's just the reality of it. Is the inner work is the most important part of your healing, but it's also can be the hardest part for the hardest thing for people to realize and to implement. So
so how did you find the mind body space? I'm assuming DNRS. How did you fall across this?
Yeah, so it's interesting because I started sharing my chronic illness journey well before I started healing. And I had a couple people comment on my videos like, oh, you should check out DNRS. And this was when I first was, on my POTS sort of journey. And I remember looking up the website and being like, that looks like a scam. That's weird. And I didn't like go any further. And this was probably 4 or 5+ years before I did start to consider brain retraining and nervous system work. Yeah. So I knew of it, and like in the groups I would occasionally see something about it, but it was never enough for me to investigate more. And I actually got to a point when I was in my bedbound phase and I was living with my parents. We moved in with my parents because we needed the help, and their neighbor recommended a Joe Dispenza book to me. And I remember thinking, and this was about the time of when I had that surgeon tell me I needed more surgery, and I said no. And I was like, I told myself, I said, I'm going to be open-minded, and I'm going to be willing to try things that are out of my comfort zone and look at ideas that, I'm not familiar with right now. And so I read the book and I was so uncomfortable the entire time. Have you read You're the Placebo by
that one, and the changing your old I forget, the habit of yourself. That's the one.
Yeah.
That's the one. Yeah.
Yeah. So I started with You're the Placebo, and I was so uncomfortable the whole time, but I was also kind of intrigued. I was like, like these people are really, like, if this is really true, then that is insane. And that is incredible that people are healing from these genetic diseases and getting out of their wheelchairs and all this stuff. And
going to his events too. They would go to his events, and within like a couple of days, they're making huge shifts already. Same thing with the NRS, their events too. I knew, I heard that they were, and then COVID happened and people had to do it online. And I was worried, well, can I still heal if it's online? And so,
Yeah. And so it wasn't Joe Dispenza's work that really ended up resonating with me, or like was what I ended up doing or implementing myself. But that was just a seed that was planted. And it takes a certain amount of those seeds to be planted before you're ready to really be willing. And I actually started to see progress by changing my diet. I tried all sorts of diets, like a million different diets, but I tried the carnivore diet, and that really brought me a lot of progress. And but it wasn't enough. It was like it was enough to where like I didn't feel like every day was unbearable. It gave my body more strength. And all those things, but I knew there kind of needed to be more. And I just started looking more into, I was drawn to DNRS, and I read Annie Hopper's book. I listened to testimonials and stuff and read blog posts about it, and I decided to try it. And so this was probably 2.5 years ago from now that I started DNRS. And so I started DNRS, and I think I was in a really good spot because I was like the type of person that needed to really research something and like already learn a lot about it before I started it. And so I had actually already implemented a lot of things that were along the lines of brain retraining, but I didn't even really know it. Like before I started brain retraining, like when I laid in bed at night, I told myself, you're healing. You're getting stronger every day, and healing.
Didn't Dispenza do that too? When he went through that bike accident, and he visualized him being better and saying it to himself and reaffirming it. And I think he did the same thing, actually.
Yeah, cool. That's awesome. Yeah, but I would just come up with these different affirmations like that. And I also was just trying to like redirect thought patterns about illness and just try to, I guess, find more joy and more meaning in my life. And so I started DNRS, and I made really quick progress. So at this point, I was doing a lot better, but I have a really long driveway. We live in kind of a forested area, and I hadn't walked to the end of my driveway yet, and I was still needing a wheelchair for distances at this point, even though I was able to be out of bed a lot more. I was able to start, doing some things around the house, but I just couldn't do the distances at this point. And after 3 weeks of doing brain retraining consistently, doing the hour of visualizations a day, I was able to walk to the end of my driveway and walk a mile.
That's fucking insane. That's fast.
It was really fast. And I think I think if I had started brain retraining like before I had started these improvements, because it had been like 8 or 10 months that I'd been doing the carnivore diet and had kind of been like,
but I think you were ready. I think you went through all the years of bullshit, trying this, trying that. I think you were at your point where I'm doing this. I'm going to stick to it. I'm doing the fucking visuals every day. And there you go.
Excited about it. Like I was like, I woke up every day excited, and I was just kind of on fire with the brain retraining stuff. And I really believed in it. Like I believed in it with everything I had. And
that's what it takes. That's what it takes.
It took a lot. And I think some people feel pressure to believe in that 100% immediately. But like, you do have to realize that I heard about DNRS 5 years before I started it. And, I had probably a year before I started DNRS was when I read that You Are the Placebo book. And so like it took time for me too. It just, I was very ready when I started. And
makes sense,
that I think was the reason why I made such quick progress with it. And it really just it just clicked for me. And I started feeling safer and safer in my body, because that was a huge thing for me when I was really sick, just feeling so unsafe and just like that my body was betraying me or something. And that it just felt so good to start to feel this new sense of safety.
And then how long did you stick to that? Did you finish it off for like a year and a half? How long was the journey?
So I did DNRS pretty strict for about a year, but actually I think another reason why I was able to do really well with DNRS was that I wasn't like a perfectionist about it, and I realized that it was okay for me to adapt these practices to things that worked for me. Like, for example, when I started, I didn't do the practices standing up. I just did them laying down. And, just these little things. And I never did the physical steps of like going
the Macarena.
Yeah. And for me, the like where you had to relate the visualization to a color, that just didn't resonate with me. And I was like,
No.
and so I just like made it my own. And
did you do the stop, my brain is in a rat? Did you do that whole thing?
I did do that for a while. Yeah.
Me too. But then 8 months.
Then I kind of made it my own. But but I think that was something I realized, is that it was okay to adapt and like add in other things, and that wasn't the end all be all for nervous system work. But I did hit a point, and I'm curious if you did too, but I hit a point where I felt like my brain was ready to process all this past trauma, but DNRS didn't really have anything for me to like
they avoid the OCD elephant in the room. So that's why I had to jump ship at 8 months. The more I healed physically, the more my mental alarms skyrocketed. So all of a sudden I have post-traumatic stress. I have phobias for no fucking reason. I have OCD looping thoughts, right? I could look at a pillow and go crazy. I could look at my steering wheel and it would be looping. And at that point I was resisting my thoughts. So the alarms got bigger and bigger and bigger. And with DNRS, it's like, just redirect, just distract, count backwards. Look at this here. Look at it, right? Don't think about just stop, right? So the more I did that, the worse shit got. So I had to get the balls and go, okay, I'm going to try this other thing over there, because I had other people in my circle that recovered, and they said, Helmut, I went through the same thing. Try this over here. Trust me, you'll be okay. And then I said, okay, I'll try it, because DNRS was everything. Right, I was holding on to it like, and then I'm like, okay, I understand. I see the evidence. They recovered it, and they did the shift too. So then I did it, and I started to allow my thoughts and feelings and symptoms, and that was the missing piece. And then finally, I could process all my mental shit, and that regulated. And then that was the missing piece for me. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's so common. And it's interesting
Yep.
that you say like your physical symptoms improved first, and then all of a sudden you felt like mentally it was
Yep.
getting crazy. And that was the same way for me. Like I physically improved really fast with brain retraining, but then I was like, oh my gosh, this like grief and this just past trauma, all these triggering things, like all these things were coming up. And I was like, oh, DNRS didn't teach me how to deal with this. And I
Nope.
think that I was really lucky though, because I was in the mind body space online. And so I was aware that, somatic practices are important too. And so
Yep.
I started getting into that with Sarah Jackson and Vanessa and Primal Trust and just
Yep.
learning those sorts of things and just realizing that my nervous system practice needed to change and evolve as I changed and evolved. And
Right.
that was okay, because I think like some people do DNRS for 5 years and they do the same thing every day. It's like a happy, joyful visualization for an hour a day. And it's like, that is a really great place to start. And for me, like, I'm not
Yep.
trying to talk bad about this, because I truly to this day, DNRS was
I'm
100%
thankful too.
the best
It was
money
a
I spent
stepping
on
stone.
myself.
Like,
It was,
thank you. Right.
yeah, and I learned a lot
But
from it, and it was a great place to start, but it wasn't everything I needed. And I
well,
think that's
that's what I noticed. Like, I used to go on the forums in the beginning, and some of these gurus that were on there, the heavyweight OGs that were on there for like 5 years, they were helping me in the beginning. They're like, how much is blah 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 blah. And then I did the shift because I was stuck, and then I came back near the end of my recovery, and I was on there helping the people that were helping me, and they were still stuck. And then I moved on with my recovery. I lapped them already, and they're still there looping on the same shit. They still got the same triggers, doing the same things, still distracting, still avoiding, still right, because they're so triggered that they don't want to, they can't move, because that opens up a can of worms.
That one thing that I would say bothers me the most about DNRS is that it's all about stick to the program will fix you, and that's all you need to do. And I think all these people say, oh, DNRS healed me, and I'm like, no, you have to take this into your hands. Like you are healing you, and
you become your own guide.
and
that's
that is
it
what is
after
most important. And so I really appreciated, like I later went through Primal Trust, and I don't know if you're familiar with Kathleen King at all, but I love that she embraces the fact that like all these things are just tools, but our ability to heal comes from within, and that is the most important part. And
Simona, she was one of the people that was there when I was stuck with DNRS, and she told me, get into ERP therapy, get into the DARE response, get into allowing and engaging, stop the resistance. I'm like, okay, I'll try that. And then she moved to Primal Trust, and I noticed lots of big changes in Primal Trust ever since she started working there, which is amazing. How people able to come in, update some things, and make it better. Because I know a lot of programs, when they first start, there's some things that are kind of not polished yet, but that's the way it goes, right? And until people till they mention it, then they have to adjust. They have to change some things, because some of these programs, you have to, you're almost getting your PhD. It's so much stuff. It's overcomplicated. You're like, you got to read this complicated book. There's so much fluff, and that can be more triggering. That can bring more symptoms, because you're like, oh, am I doing it right? Do I have to dig for this? Do I have to change my core beliefs? Do I have to? My core beliefs are still there. I don't know what to, right? And that can make things more complicated.
Dysregulated over trying it's too hard to regulate.
Right.
And I think it's just sometimes we have to come back to the basics, right? Like when I was in really the depths of my healing journey and starting to see the most progress, some days I would lay a towel down on the grass and I would lay outside for hours. And I would just like have, be grounding outside and getting the sunlight. Usually I do this like in the morning hours, and that was so healing. I'd just sit there and do nothing and like just listen to the sounds of nature. And that was really healing for me too. So
the biggest nuggets that I love about DNRS that I still use today, actually, I haven't stopped in 4.5 years. I have not fucking stopped doing visuals. I love them. I use them for relationships, businesses, to create my reality. I love visuals. I enjoy it. It's not such a, oh fuck, here we go, I got to do an hour of fucking. For me, it's I can't fucking wait. I'll get my tea. I'll go park by, a park area. And then, it's like having a meeting with myself. I'm like, all right, let's do this. Let's get into this. Right.
Yeah.
Did you get into the visuals? Did you enjoy it?
Yeah, I definitely enjoyed it. I would say I went through different periods of resistance and really not wanting to
Yeah.
do it. But for me, often it was just the starting. That was the hardest
Mm-hmm.
part. And then once I got started, I was like, oh, this helps so much. But
But it makes sense in the beginning. Your brain's perceiving danger. It's got to get your attention to the laggards that are behind your back. So your gate's a little bit closed. But eventually, when you keep doing it, just like learning how to ride a bike, that gate
Mhm.
opens up, and you'll start to flow with your visuals eventually easier. And that's just the way it goes. It's gonna suck in the beginning, but you'll get better at it, like with anything. But gotta stick to it
Yeah,
though.
it's cool too just to let it evolve and change and even incorporate like somatic practices within your visualizations and to I don't know, for me, as I've been working on even more like deeper limiting beliefs over the last year or so, just doing visualizations specific to embracing my new beliefs as I let go
Mm-hmm.
of those limiting beliefs that weren't serving me.
Yeah.
And so yeah, I love it too.
Did you notice that this is a perfect opportunity to talk about the spiritual side of things? Did you find that you got more spiritual going through this journey?
Yeah, I would say so. I've always been someone that is, has faith in God, and faith has
Mm-hmm.
been an important part of my life. And I think that's one thing that really just like kept me going
Yep.
when I was sick. And I think I had this mindset which I I don't really believe is right now, but I had this mindset of like, well, what if God wants me sick, and what if this is just my purpose here to be sick? And I,
That's true. I see that a lot with myself too, and other people that I know. They're like, "No, I'm supposed to suffer because it's the righteous thing, and I'm here to serve." Right?
yeah,
And it's like, no, you're
yeah,
supposed to overcome. You're supposed
no.
to.
And that's the thing is that I've realized that, you know, the root of a lot of what happens with chronic illness comes from fear because we're not feeling safe in our bodies, our nervous systems aren't feeling safe, so we're
Yeah.
not able to function properly. And God doesn't give the spirit of fear, so that fear isn't from God. And I really do believe God wants us all to be well. And
Yeah.
it's I think sometimes people also get like it's been so long that they've been sick that even the idea of getting better, there's a small part of them that is scared of that. And
Yeah.
and that
Well,
it
because
can be
everything's changing now. You identify with something all your life. Even your handle, it might say Lyme Warrior or blah blah blah. Right? That's your reality, and all of a sudden, oh, I
yeah.
can. What do I do now? What do I do right now? I'm
Yeah, and
awakened.
it's like you have this one focus for all these years, and it's just get better, get better, get better, fix, 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 and that's all you can focus on. And then all of a sudden, now you have to create this new life and figure out who you want
Yeah.
to be and get back into normal life. And it's so uncomfortable. I mean, it's amazing, but
Well,
it's
Shawshank
uncomfortable.
Redemption, like that movie, Shawshank Redemption. That one of the guys, he's in prison for like I don't know 50 years, and then he finally gets out, and he's like, I only know what it's like to be in prison. I don't know what to do with my life, and he couldn't handle it. But I understand what you mean. You're finally out there. What do you do? What do I
Yeah,
like? What I want to, right?
yeah, and you're like trying to meet with people, and they're like, "What do you do?" And I'm like, "I don't know. I just got out of bed for the first time in years."
Yeah, it's like a rebirth. It's magical,
Yeah,
and I'm grateful for it. But yeah, it can be a challenge for sure. Yeah,
yeah. All in all good things like and that's what I always tried to tell myself through these like the challenges that come with recovery. It's the good kind of hard,
yeah.
it's it's what you want when you're sick, but you
It's
just
a good problem to have, right?
it is.
If you were to go, if you were to give somebody advice that's just starting this mind body space, let's say you were to go back in time, talk to your old self, or somebody right now is getting into it. Give me one or two things of advice that you would tell them. What would you say?
I would definitely tell tell them that, your story isn't unique. That
Yeah,
healing is possible even from the worst of places. Even when you think that you're different and maybe this other person can heal, but you can't, it's
yep,
not true. It's not
yeah,
true. It's always possible. And no matter what a doctor has told you, no matter what, you know, this mindset that you've had for so long, like so many people are healing, so many people are recovering, and it's really cool to just, come to podcasts like this and see how all these people were told, you'll never get better, you'll always be sick, all these things, and they're getting better. And the truth is that our bodies were designed to heal, and that's amazing, and that's incredible. And so when you really start to realize that and let that sink in, like it can change everything. And so I just say, keep going and work with your body, not against it. Your body is always fighting, is always working for you, and never fighting against you.
Yeah, that's great. I totally agree 1000%. What I usually say is don't worry about if you're creating neural pathways, or if your biome's being balanced, if your kidneys or liver are detoxing. Just support it by, updating your programming and let it do its work. The brain knows how to create neural pathways. Your gut knows how to rebalance. Your body knows how to heal. Get out of the way. Stop micromanaging your body, and it'll do its thing. And trust, like finally give it a chance to do its thing. Get out of the way, and don't try to keep micromanaging all the parts of your body.
Yeah,
so that makes sense.
Absolutely.
Awesome. Anything else you would like to add?
Not that I can think of right now. Just I mean, anyone that's in a dark place right now, just know you're not alone, and really do your best to try to believe that healing is possible for you. And if you're not ready to believe that, you can borrow belief from somebody else, and just start with a maybe. Like, what if I could get better? What if that could be possible for me? And eventually that can turn into belief and knowledge that you really can get better. So
awesome. Thank you very much for being on this interview. It's been great. Powerful golden nuggets. What you could do is email me some of the links to your Instagram, YouTube, so people can get a hold of you and they can check out your stuff. And I'll put it in the description along with all the symptoms that she had. We might have not covered some of them, but I'll have them in the description. And then maybe we'll have you back in like 6 months for an update, for if somebody's got any questions, and then we can give them a little bit of an update. But I want to thank you for being there.
Thanks so much for having me.
Thank you.